welcome back to Plug and Play EV. I'm Steve, and this is our all-seasons review of the Hyundai IONIQ 5, our all-wheel drive limited 2022 model, taken across 4 seasons here in Greater Boston and across the places we've been with the car. So let's jump into our all-seasons review of the 2022 Hyundai IONIQ 5. So a little background to our ownership. We got the car back in spring 2022. We got a little bit on the tail end of the cold temperatures around Boston, or at least the below freezing temperatures that we have around Greater Boston, but not too much in the way of winter driving, very little snow at that point, and not much of a chance to test that early on. But we did get the lower temperatures that impact charging, all that good stuff for the kind of April period of owning the car. So we got some time to test that and see the lower rates that we would get when the battery was cold, and this was before we had any battery preconditioning. So initially kind of moderate temperatures in the 40s and 50s for most of our travel, and a lot of around town driving at that point. So we had our eye on the IONIQ 5 since the turn of the year. We vacillated a little bit between the SEL and the Limited, eventually went with the Limited for a few reasons, the large panoramic vision roof being one of them, and a few other features that we thought would be good for family of 4 traveling with kids in the back quite often. And eventually found one at a dealership a little further away, but still in Massachusetts, and in the color we wanted, the digital teal here. But we'd had no problems. The dealership was perfectly straightforward, not EV experts by any stretch, but also not trying to add on any markups, any hidden fees or packages, that kind of thing. So we're perfectly happy with the dealership experience, in as much as it got us the car when we wanted it quickly. And that was more or less it. We were into the dealership in the morning and out early just after lunch, so no hidden fees, no delays, that kind of thing. It's possibly a little bit early because we have had the Bolt EV, which is 2020 model of that, and we could have had a bit longer in that car just by itself and then maybe bought later. But as it turned out, later on in the year, the federal tax credit disappeared for the Hyundai and Kia models, so we were happy enough. Dealer experience, no problem. Got it at MSRP for a decent price and didn't take too long. So obviously, coming from a Chevrolet Bolt EV, you're moving a step up with this particular Hyundai, at least in terms of fit, finish, what the vehicle's capable of. So there's a lot of pros there already, just by virtue of spending what is now almost twice as much on the car compared to the current new Chevrolet Bolt EVs. But you know, we've liked the 2020 Bolt EV. It's done a lot of good jobs for us. It's worked as a single family car, a local grocery getter, and a road tripper. So it has done all the duties that we've asked of it, and the IONIQ 5 is a step up in terms of road tripping especially, but also the cabin comfort, the size, the space, all of that stuff is just by virtue of the vehicle being larger and newer is more capable. That's definitely the case with the IONIQ 5. There's a big difference compared to something like the Kona Electric even, which is a nice car and a solid interior in its own right. But this really goes for open cabin, very spacious design, well laid out, and a lot of comfort features that we've come to enjoy. And I did a video comparing the Bolt EV initially to the IONIQ 5, looking at 5 ways the Bolt EV still can beat this car, even with its lower price point and more dated design. So that's an interesting video to watch if you want to see those initial kind of things that the Bolt EV still did a little bit better than the IONIQ 5. But really, it's a big long list of pros in this car. From there, we love the driving experience. It's not sporty by any stretch of the imagination, but it's a lot quicker off the line in sport mode than the Bolt EV, than what we're coming from. Very well insulated cabin, airy with the vision roof that you'll get on the Limited, but even in the ones that we test drove that were the SE and the SEL trims, still very spacious cabin, not as much light coming in perhaps, but certainly you get the same amount of big open space, nice seats in the back for people who are sitting back there, big amount of space. We've done road trips with 4 adults in this car, as well as the 2 kids in other trips, and it's been comfortable for everyone. People who are back in the rear seats are able to recline, stretch out, sleep if they want to. We've had the pets in here as well as the kids, so it's been very good as a road tripper for that kind of family of 4 and a little extra luggage that maybe we'd skimped on the Bolt a little bit and had some squeezing in to do. We moved into the summer months, we started to look at road trips and jumping into the real strength of this car. When it hits the highway and tries to cover hundreds of miles in a day, you're really getting close to those kind of gas journeys where you can, not even think so much about the stops other than now where EV charging is and where you need to eat, that kind of thing. But being able to stop and have those kind of 15-20 minute charge times was really reliable. I know some people had some problems getting those 10 to 80% times in 18 minutes. We, from one of the first tests we did, which you can also see on the channel, had no problems. I think it was just over 18 minutes, 19 minutes to 80% from 10% in good conditions, obviously. But as we hit the summer travel, it covered all of the distances we wanted to do, 4,000 miles over a few weeks of summer travel across like 10-11 states, something like that. And the national parks that we hit as part of our summer travels, ate them up, no problems. Good experiences with Electrify America on those trips. Really no major inconveniences other than congestion in some places in the busier charging stations. But again, it kind of gets through those charging sessions so quickly that you don't feel like you're the one holding things up. You jump on, you're done in 20 minutes and you move on, let the next person charge. And for road tripping, especially in the non-Tesla setting, it's the gold standard right now, I would think. Another benefit that we started to use on the road trips, especially as we camped, was the V2L function. In some cases that can be gimmicky. It's not something you're going to use every day unless you're out and about trying to work remotely perhaps, or power things in places where you are off the grid or a little bit further away from your home. For us, that didn't really come into play until we started camping and wanted to power devices on the go, kettles, have little movie nights in the car. Became very useful on the road and having a power bank, but just for that initial kind of use case and starting to explore how it could be useful, we did find that a nice handy feature. Other than that, it's worth noting that this is going to be an increasingly common part of EV features, so you're going to use that potentially as a backup source of power for your home, charging other EVs. The IONIQ 5 and EV6 are going to be slower at that because the top added around 1.9 kilowatts here in North America, so that's not going to be a charge that's going to ramp you up very quickly. It's certainly going to be more like a trickle charge at home and just in emergency cases. But then you get to other vehicles like the Ford F-150 Lightning, Rivians, those that have more powerful onboard charging capabilities to push the other way to a vehicle, and you can start to see those vehicles rescuing other EVs in the sort of scenarios that don't happen very often, but where people say, well, I could just take a gas can to rescue a gas car. Well, these EVs that are on the road are going to be able to get there, get next to a car, charge it up and give it the mileage it needs to get to a nearby EV charger. So for those scenarios and many others, the V2L, bidirectional charging, whatever you're going to call it, has been useful to us as a novelty and something for vacation time, but in future I can see us using it in a variety of scenarios. So summer, big positives. Obviously felt great about owning the car after doing thousands and thousands of miles, passing 15,000 miles, getting the road trips under our belt and charging in those crazy fast speeds. As fall started to come on, we took that to its extreme and tried to do the 1,000 kilometer challenge, which is almost the exact amount from certain locations in Massachusetts over to Cleveland, Ohio, where we regularly visit our in-laws, and we're able to do the run in about 10.5 hours. We feel like we could probably shave some of that off if we had slightly warmer conditions, didn't have the traffic that we ran into. I'm fairly confident we could get a sub 10-hour time if we hit everything perfect. And with the charging curve being so good, it kind of gets glossed over when in favor of the max charging power. When we talk about V3 superchargers doing 250 kilowatts and Hummer EVs doing up to 300 plus kilowatts, that's obviously a benefit, and you're getting the benefit of the larger battery pack in the case of the Hummer EV. But in the case of the Tesla, it's only spiking early on, so you need to be a pretty low state of charge, and then the charge curve is just a gradual taper to lower power. With the IONIQ 5, you're more on the level of a Tesla with that 77.4 kilowatt hour battery pack, close to the 75 to 80 kilowatt hours. But the charge curve is where it shines, because you're still potentially getting that 240 kilowatts that it peaks at in the 50 to 60% bracket. Sometimes we've seen that even as late as the Thanksgiving travel once the pack had warmed up. So it's capable of going to work. It works more on a, what's the battery temperature, when can I surge this up to its top peak. And so in terms of seasons, we move on to winter. I've had some light snow here a couple of times. The first time was when the roads hadn't been treated yet, very early, kind of pre-winter, freeze and cold. I did feel a bit skittish on the roads at that point, but having looked back at the comments from drivers in general across Massachusetts when that hit, everybody was sliding off the roads, and it was more because the roads, they weren't quite ready for that storm, I don't think, that we had. But since then, anything that's been in terms of ice and snow and rain, albeit very light snow so far, we've felt good in. It's a big, solid, heavy vehicle, so you get that advantage of the EV with the weight low down. The snow mode seems to work fairly well. It gives a good amount of balance to the wheels, plenty of power without surging it as sport mode would. So there's a fairly decent track of snow. We just left that one there with a few accelerations and just watch the tires go as we drive across this. It feels pretty normal. If I try and brake, seems to apply everything pretty evenly. That's pretty nice. I mean, I wouldn't go careening around in this. It's not got winter tires on, as we say. It's got some provisions with the snow mode, but you can see the tracks that we've left here. It's pretty slushy, so there's nothing crazy to deal with, but we can certainly get a lot of traction there. It seems to be balancing out the power pretty nicely. Get to a 30 miles an hour. And then the braking, a little bit heavy, but definitely does the job. So pretty good. So that seems to be solid as a drive mode so far. So moving to all-wheel drive, having a heavier vehicle with a bit more of a lower spread out wheelbase, it feels even better and more confident in those conditions so far. Where the IONIQ 5 has really excelled is in rain, heavy rain conditions. It took a lot of rain when we were on the road back from Ohio to make us pull off and take some shelter, just to reassess options and look at the weather. But in almost all heavy rain conditions that we've had, aside from the sensors being blocked and having the usual kind of problems with visibility that any car would, the IONIQ 5 feels planted, plows on through rain at the reasonable speeds without going excessive, and feels like it's gonna give you the control you need. Heavy winds do buffet it a little bit because it is a bit of a block, but it's not something that feels like you're going to be pushed off the road. It's more just you can feel the strength of the wind against the weight of the car. So it still feels planted, very little of the wobble that we felt in the Bolt at higher wind speeds, and it feels good. There's very, very few occasions other than that kind of untreated roads at the start of winter where we felt it would have any problems in driving conditions that were less than optimal. Then in terms of winter cabin comfort, very good. You can do the usual stuff with preconditioning from the app, set up a various presets so that you say you want a winter defrost. We've got more of a kind of cold weather comfort. If you don't want to blast the car with heat, you just want to get it to a comfortable 70, 72 degrees, you can do that. Lots of little customizations in terms of what level of heat, whether it uses the defrosters, whether it puts the heated steering wheel and seats on, that kind of thing. So that's been very nice for winter. Heated seats are excellent, very wide. I would put them probably on a par with the Volkswagen ID4, which was my kind of go-to as a example of excellent seats and kind of premium wide bum warmers before these. They're about as good a job, I would say. And the seats in general, very comfortable, just enough bolstering on either side to keep you comfortable. Coming from the Bolt, obviously, people complain about those seats a lot. Never had problems with them ourselves, but this is obviously a step up. We feel the step up when we go to a Tesla with slightly cushier cushioned seats. And in this, it's a little stiffer in terms of the padding, but you know, it's still very nice, very well supported, and you can get 600-700 mile drive days in this with no problems in comfort at all. pros as overall categories. Comfort, outstanding, great road tripper, really nice place to be, lots of open space, light, cabin storage, all good stuff. Very quiet, doesn't really feel any more noisy at high speeds than it does on your local roads, and that's a plus really. You can cruise at pretty much any speed that you're comfortable going, and it will feel like a refined, quiet place to be. Charging speeds obviously super important, and one of the main factors in buying this car, but you know, even better than we thought really, not just because of the maximum and the 15 to 20 minute charge times that you're getting from low to high, but also because the charge curve's excellent. It knows exactly when to go to work, and if you're outside of those lower temperatures or too high temperatures in the summer trips, the spring trips, and even early fall, you're getting maximum power and those short charge times in almost any weather, and battery preconditioning now should make that true of winter as well, and that generally means the car is going to be ready before you are, so that's been a benefit. Even going to very high states of charge, 90-95%, you're still at the kind of 40-50 kilowatt level, which obviously we come from a Bolt, we're very used to that being the maximum. But even if you're, you know, coming from a gas car, I think the charge times are going to impress in terms of getting you back on the road, you know, within 15 to 20 minutes. Maybe the efficiency is the offset of that. You can't necessarily drive the 250 to 300 miles that people might think from the EPA range. It's always going to be lower on highway, but they haven't managed to transfer the efficiency of the Kona electric into this Hyundai IONIQ 5. It still is pretty thirsty, but it's a heavy vehicle, it's all-wheel drive. That's just the nature of the beast, and those charge times really do offset that lack of efficiency, if you like, and make it much more manageable. And the biggest pro really combines all of those things, being a fast road tripper and very spacious and comfortable for a family of 4. We've been able to go on these trips, you know, admittedly with the Electrify America free charging, making the cost very low, but covering those long distances, getting everything for camping into the car, occasional squeeze, but really still having a lot of space unless we had everything in here all at one time, pets and people included. So lots of good experiences from that, and that really kind of sums up the, you know, if we had any doubts at the start as to whether this was going to be the right car for us, having those trips over the summer, squeezing everything in, the customizable space, the just general real ease of road tripping made it wash away any concerns that we had. And in the middle of the pros and cons here, highway drive assist. Now that should be a massive pro if you are talking to my wife, who absolutely loves it, would put it on in almost any scenario and let the car do most of the work for her. I admit it is a good system, especially on the highway. It's very competent. It has the alternating speed, so it allows you to set the distance to the car in front that you're comfortable, and it'll alternate the speed based on how far the car is. It will keep you in lane. There's not much ping-ponging at all unless it's really poorly marked roads. So the system works. It's HDA2. For me, it's more about driver assist in general and how I feel about it. In normal road conditions on the interstate, if there's not a whole lot of traffic, I'm perfectly fine with it as a cruise control kind of system, glorified cruise control, keeping you in the lane, distance from the car in front, and just, you know, being set at 70-75 miles an hour, going no problem. When it comes to lane changes, it's very just feels too ponderous. Takes a long time to get into the lane, takes a while to speed up. I'm not comfortable with it, so I usually take over, which bugs my wife because the driver assist is there to assist the driver and let it do what it is supposed to do. So she loves it. I'm fine with it as a system. I know it works, but I will not use it in non-highway driving, in heavy traffic, in places where I know I need to zip in and out of lanes for any reason. It's just too ponderous. So despite all of those positives, it wouldn't be a true owner review if we didn't get to some of the groans and gripes about the car. The first one has to be efficiency. Although we found ways to make it more efficient and to eke out some more miles in the warmer months, there's no denying this car is a bit thirsty for what it is. You know, if we're not having a huge pack like some of them do with the you know, the Mach-E getting up into the 90s in terms of kilowatt hours. This has a 77 kilowatt hour pack, and we're typically seeing that kind of 2.5 to 3 miles per kilowatt hour on a good day, which makes it a thirsty car. And again, we're coming from a Bolt EV, which is a lighter car, only has the front wheel drive, so it's not using as much energy to get up to speed. It's not as quick, it's not carrying as much along in terms of refinement and equipment. So you got to bear all that in mind when we're comparing the efficiency there. But for the sake of anyone who's coming from something like, especially if you're looking at upgrading from something like a Hyundai Kona Electric, you've got to be aware that the trade-off is going to be efficiency. You get a lot back in terms of charging speed and cabin comfort, but that efficiency is rarely going to be as high as some of these more nippy, lighter electric vehicles that are out there. So that's not a huge deal in local driving, and on the road, as I said, the charging by being so fast offsets that, but it's something to bear in mind. It is going to eat more of those to power itself along, and at the moment with the free Electrify America charging, you're not really thinking about how much it costs to charge. In most instances, you're done in that 30 minutes of complimentary charging window, and you're just on your way. But as you start to move out of the free bracket, you're going to be paying more for the electricity that you use because it's not using it as efficiently. So something to bear in mind for the long term. In the near term, you get that free Electrify America charging, and if you can find ways to eke out extra miles, it's not a huge con. Other minor gripes, although it is, a very nice cabin, and we've kind of touched on that as a positive, there are some little squeaks and squiggles here and there. Because it's so quiet, you do hear them. I rarely focus on them when we're on highway trips. The radio's going, the other competing noises are overshadowing them. If you're on local roads, and we've had some really cruddy roadwork near us recently on some of the roads near our house, that you can just hear every little squeak and rattle. Whether or not that's a big factor to you is really down to your tolerance for that kind of thing. I know people take them in and get them fixed. I rarely hear them, as I say, unless we're on these kind of local small drives. On the navigation system not being great, I mean, we don't have one native in the Bolt, so it's been an upgrade in terms of actually having something there, but it is dated in terms of UI and that kind of thing. The over-the-air updates are nice to have, but they don't tend to fix a whole lot of stuff. There's been updated maps, that kind of thing. Little changes to the user interface, but nothing as major as a Tesla. And I think Ford, from what I see from other owners, seems to do those updates with power up a little better. But then it's way above something like a Volkswagen that's been waiting forever. Or comparing to the Bolt EV, where I think we got 2 updates early on with our 2017 and have never really looked at anything after that other than the recall related stuff. Another con is sensitivity of some of the set driver safety features. In terms of local driving and the radar, detecting cars and obstacles, it gets really picky in certain circumstances. But, when you're getting close to other cars and you're just at a stoplight, that kind of thing, sometimes the parking and sensor alerts will go off. So those parking sensors can get a little bit annoying here and there. Again, it hasn't happened often enough that it is a major frustration, but it's something that'll come on in local traffic, distract you from something that is an otherwise perfectly fine scenario, and that's not dangerous. It's just something that they could certainly improve, dialing in that sensitivity a little bit so that it knows when you are in a real close proximity danger and when it's just a car moving off in front of you or that kind of thing. So those are our seasonal impressions and the pros and cons of the Hyundai IONIQ 5 after a year of ownership. One thing we didn't really cover in this and outside of the scope of the initial review here is some of the issues that people have had with things like the 12-volt battery and the ICCU. We haven't had those, so it's not something you can really reflect on too much. You can obviously look at those who've been affected and how widespread they are. At the moment, we're at about 25,000 miles and haven't seen any of that, so that will be in a future update if it happens, and as we get more information from other IONIQ 5 owners. Future updates will also look at wear and tear on the car, how it's fared after more than a year, and once we hit kind of 25,000-30,000 miles, we'll start to go over the car with a fine-tooth comb and look at how it's held up to all that travel. But for now, those are our impressions. Have you driven in an IONIQ 5? Are you considering one? Would you now prefer the Hyundai IONIQ 6 now that that's out, or are you more looking at one of the competitors like the Kia EV6, Genesis GV60 if you're feeling a bit more fancy, or one of the other manufacturers? Let us know down in the comments what you think and how you feel about the Hyundai IONIQ 5. Thanks for watching and see you in the next one.